Well, welcome back, everybody, from extended break. Who would have thought we would be having twice a spring break that we were anticipating, and now we are doing online classes. I'm determined to make sure you're successful here. I'm picking up right about where we left off last time when we were talking about the different views of determinism and freedom. We have already begun to look at hard determinism. We discussed that. We are in the middle of discussing soft determinism, and then we're going to move on to libertarianism. So let's move through on this slideshow. Soft determinism defines freedom, a voluntary act, considerably differently than what we found with hard determinism. That's in fact one of the key differences between the two. You may recall that hard determinism said that an act was free just in case the person could choose to do otherwise. You may also recall that those hard determinists believe that there are no such acts in that set of things that we could do otherwise. Everything is caused. There's no wiggle room for being able to choose other than we choose. Soft determinism defines a voluntary action a bit differently, as we discussed last time. They say, look, freedom is when we can do an act because we want to, and we're not forced to do the act. So remember here, what's missing is the ability to choose other than what we do. The idea of contrary choice is just not here. Choosing what to eat or what to wear, signing up for a philosophy class, for example, these feel like voluntary actions to us, and they can be distinguished from those that are forced on us. So while our choices are caused, remember this is soft determinism, our choices are caused, not all causes are compulsions. And that's the mistake that, according to soft determinism, hard determinism makes. Certain causes we call voluntary or not coerced. And they're those that we're doing what I want to do, and we're not forced to do the action. So freedom, notice, according to soft determinism, is the ability to do what I want. It's not the ability to choose otherwise. They're deterministic. They don't believe we can choose otherwise because we're acting on our desires. But they do make a distinction between voluntary acts and involuntary acts. In fact, A.J. Ayer, a famous philosopher, says, if I suffer from a neurological compulsion, a kind of neurosis, that forces me to get up and walk across the room or make my limbs shake. These are the kinds of things that are caused acts, and they're non-voluntary. They're compelled. But on the other hand, if I were to get up and just walk across the room voluntarily, those are also caused kinds of events, but they're caused by an agent. They're caused by me and my desires. So while both actions, those of someone, say, is suffering from a neurological disease, and me, who voluntarily gets up and walks across the room, both actions are caused, but one set of causes are compulsions or coercions, and another set of actions are me acting on my desires. So it's not just because an action has any cause at all that it's said to be not free, but only certain kinds of causes are said to be not free, according to soft determinism. So freedom is the ability to do what I want. Responsibility then has to do with how much am I self-determined, as opposed to being determined by my upbringing or by others who are compelling me. So someone who grew up with a very bad family environment might grow up to be a sociopath or psychopath or something like that. We might find them guilty if they committed crimes, but we're more likely to say that, well, their desires aren't what they should be because of their background. Whereas someone who grew up this side of privilege, who acted really poorly and caused mayhem, we would probably hold them to a greater degree of responsibility because they had greater degree of self-determination. At least that's the thought. So soft determinism defines a voluntary act a little bit different. So there are some problems with the definition of a free act, according to hard determinists criticize soft determinism by saying, well, look, listen, our wants are caused by conditioning, that they're not any different than any other cause, that the reason why you like macaroni and cheese or don't like it, that's caused by previous causes. So That's no different than any other kind of cause that would occur in the world. No different than my dog salivating when I get ready to feed them. You stand in front of the sub and want macaroni and cheese. Those are both caused kinds of events. The feeling that an act is not forced is not enough. That is, the distinction Ayer was making is that I don't feel like I'm forced when I get up and voluntarily act, but I feel like I am forced when I have a neurological disorder. Hard determinism says, nope, that feeling is not enough. They're both forced, therefore they are both caused, and therefore you're not free. And the other criticism they make is really if freedom is acting on our desires, well, where did our desires come from? Where did your wishes come from? How much of our desires and wishes are the result, say here in America, and of conditioning by our environment? When I go out and think I need a new pair of jeans, I go and try to buy some Levi's or something that someone might find to be stylish. Or where did I get those ideas, those desires from? Well, a lot of that would come from advertising or branding. Which phone we buy, what computer we buy, those seem to us to be free actions, but those advertisers are paying literally billions of dollars to influence our desires. In fact, to make us have certain kinds of desires for certain kinds of products. And so really, are our wishes and desires under our control, or are we merely programmed? So those are some criticisms, usually that hard determinism is directing at soft determinism, saying you're just not going far enough here in your understanding of determinism. So we've looked at two different kinds of determinism, hard determinism and soft determinism. They both are deterministic. The difference between the two, as we've seen, is primarily a different understanding of what it means to be free. Both of them suffer from a similar set of criticisms as indicated here on the slide. They both have a rather outdated view of causal laws. They seem to reside on the idea that causal laws are like small pool balls bumping into each other on a pool table. Whereas most physicists these days and scientists tell us causal laws are more about probability than they are about something smacking into something else, at least at certain kinds of causes. So these two views have not incorporated this more sophisticated understanding of causal laws. Another problem, and probably a deeper one for both views, is the problem of truly unpredictable events. Now, an event can be unpredictable because we just don't know enough, but other kinds of events can be unpredictable because they're not knowable. We find in nature, for example, that apparently there are certain events that do not have causes. Earlier in the semester, I had given an illustration of going to the dentist, and the dentist telling you that you have a cavity that's just not caused by anything. And furthermore, I suggested that that might be quite odd for us, and indeed it is on the level of cavities. But if you are a subatomic particle physicist, you are quite familiar with particles simply appearing and disappearing, doing odd things, changing their momentum or location or spin for no reason. There are no causes at that level. And so it seems as if things just happen in nature. One example we've talked about earlier is those radioactive elements such as uranium or plutonium that throw off protons out of their atoms at a regular rate that we can measure with a Geiger counter. Scientists tell me that the proton that is thrown off at any second is not one that is caused by anything. It simply happens. Protons just leave, and there's no cause for it. It's not the case that we can't know the cause, it's that there isn't one. So that kind of thing is really outside of our experience, but if it's true, and it seems to be true, then the basic claim of determinism, that is, all events are caused, is not true, at least in the case of these subatomic events. Another problem with unpredictable events has to do with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, this is called. And you may have heard about this, is that Heisenberg was a scientist who, through his experimentation, realized that when we are looking at that subatomic world, once again, we can either know the position of an electron, let's say, its momentum and its direction,
or we can know its location. We can't know both. And the problem, as he indicated, is not that our instruments are not sensitive enough. It's rather that it's not any place. Certain objects in the universe can appear as particles, a little ball, and others it can at the same moment act as a wave. And so nature is quite exotic in certain areas. It's unlike our everyday experience. And the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says, at the very fundamental basis of reality, there's a great deal of uncertainty there as to the stability of these little balls that bump around. And so, for our purposes here in talking philosophically about determinism, the problem here is with truly unpredictable events. That is, events that are not caused. Thirdly, both views of determinism have some difficulty with the idea being that no acts are free. That sentence, no acts are free, is consistent with all situations. Now, you might think that it would be good if it's consistent with all situations, but because it's unfalsifiable, that is, it can't be made false in any scenario, since it can't be made false, it can't be tested. And so we should have some doubts as to whether we can believe it. It may be true, that is, that no acts are free, but it is unfalsifiable, and so it should give us some pause before we agree to it if it's unfalsifiable. If I were to tell you, here's another unfalsifiable claim. If I tell you all human actions are based upon self-interest, that may be true, that they are based on self-interest. But if they're all based on self-interest, then no example of any human action that you could ever give me would be interpreted as not being motivated by self-interest. Someone throwing themselves on a grenade in war, a mother giving her life for her children, or a father doing the same. All of those, under this view, would be interpreted as acts of self-interest. So that seems to be a claim that can't be tested. You may have had a similar experience that I've had from time to time, in that oftentimes extreme weather events, whether high temperatures or low temperatures, many hurricanes or few hurricanes, more rain than normal, less rain than normal, all of these events, whether more or less, are often interpreted by our press as a confirmation of global climate change. Now, I'm not making a claim here about the truth or falsity of global climate change. My point is, if in fact every weather event, no matter what, to the extreme or extreme cold or extreme warm, affirms global warming, then it seems it might be an unfalsifiable premise. Now, that's not how scientists understand it. It's how the press is understood. I'm just trying to point out your experience of reading those newspapers, and the first time you ever thought, wow, last year it was hot and they said it was confirmation of global warming, and this year it's cool and they say it's confirmation of global warming. That skepticism you're beginning to have is about this claim that it's unfalsifiable. And so that's the problem with this determinism. No acts are free. It seems to be untestable. Fourthly, it contradicts our ordinary human experience. As I mentioned before, our experience of ourselves as choosers is as making choices. Yes, we are aware of the forces that are acting upon us, my likes and my dislikes, the way I've been conditioned perhaps. But once I become aware of that, then I can act differently, or at least attempt to do so. We are aware of the reasons acting upon us, unlike other creatures, let's say. We think how to behave. We consider reasons how we behave. Indeed, we can go to therapy or talk to friends or read books or take sensitivity training and become more aware of the forces that are impinging upon us, that are influencing our behavior. And so that's an example where we're not just like a pinball in a pinball machine. So it contradicts our ordinary experience of choice. And so since it so deeply contradicts that experience, determinism has to really explain how our choices are made. And then finally, both determinisms suffer from the idea of the need for what we call teleological explanations. That is, we look for purpose or reasons. When I ask you why you did something, why you bought a pair of jeans, why you ate some food, why you signed up for philosophy class, you're going to speak in terms of purposes. The purposes of graduation, you wanted to graduate, you have an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. You're not going to talk in terms of, well, I was caused to, I was moved to, my desires compelled me to. We speak in terms of purposes. And I think determinism needs to explain why our teleological explanations are so powerful. So these are just a few of the central problems with both kinds of determinism.
Well, welcome back, everybody, from view of the problem of freedom and determinism called libertarianism. It's also known as indeterminism, and that is the idea that freedom is the freedom to choose between options. And so it disagrees with both soft determinism and hard determinism about the nature of freedom. Now, you'll see that, as I'll say later on how they define freedom, that it's actually the same definition that hard determinism will give. Libertarianism attacks the claim all events are caused. They want to say certain events are not caused. They're not caused, at least not in the way that determinism would like to think about causality. So let's see how libertarianism defines freedom. Now remember here, I'm not talking about the political movement called libertarianism. This is a different kind of thing. So libertarian freedom is, a definition is, I can do X, I can do some action. I have the ability to do that. I want to do the action. So notice they're incorporating your ability, number one. And number two, they're incorporating your desire, right? I want to do X. And then thirdly, I really can do something other than X. That is denied by soft determinism. In soft determinism, it's not necessary. In hard determinism, they think it can't be done. Remember, the definition of freedom by hard determinism and libertarian freedom is the same, except hard determinism thinks there are no such events that satisfy point number 3 here. You really can do something other than what you in fact choose. So you're standing there in front of the sub, you're thinking about choosing what to eat. You have choices to make. You can either choose the macaroni and cheese or the salad bar. You want the salad bar, and so you choose it. Could you have chosen the macaroni and cheese? Yes. If you could have, then that was a free action according to libertarian freedom. So that's how they define freedom. If the ability to choose otherwise is necessary, this is also called incompatibilism. That is, that freedom is incompatible with being determined or with determinism. So that's libertarian freedom. Most people have an understanding of their own freedom as libertarian in nature. It seems to us as if we can do otherwise. That doesn't mean it's true. It's a very strong feeling, as if we can choose other than we do. So let's take a look at some defense of libertarian freedom. One of the defenses is our experience, but the other point they would make is that reasons are not the same as causes. Are you just a cog in a machine? That when it comes to persons, we're not like billiard balls bouncing around on a pool table or a ball bouncing around in a pinball machine. We're not like that disc in the Plinko game on The Price is Right. Persons are not things. We are conscious of the operations of laws on us. In fact, I can become conscious of how I've been conditioned a particular way, or how advertising, say, has affected me to make a choice, or how my parents have raised me so that I might desire certain kinds of things. I can become conscious of these, and once becoming conscious, I can act differently under certain circumstances. Secondly, I always view myself as distinct from those laws and those systems acting on me. It's not as if I say, oh, I'm just a helpless ball in a machine being knocked about, I don't have freedom. It seems as if I can make choices that go against the conditioning that I have received, the branding that I've received, especially when I become conscious of it. In fact, a lot of our things like sensitivity training or becoming aware of, say, consumerism are ways of raising our own knowledge, our awareness of how we are steered towards to be certain kinds of people, to make certain kinds of choices. And so the very fact that we can do that we can overcome those, indicates, so the argument goes, that we are not things that are just being blown about, but rather are persons who are making choices. Choices under influence, no doubt. But we do have choices, is the argument here. And our behavior is based on reasons, not causes. If I ask you, what are you doing over the break, and why are you doing it, you're likely to speak in terms of your own agency, that you've made certain kinds of choices. We make choices for reasons. We don't focus on causes. We don't say, well, my legs brought me to class, or I'm staying home because my brain tells me to, or something like this. Instead, we talk in terms of our own personal decision making. So the appeal here is that reasons are not the same as causes, and that's the distinction that hard determinism can make. Hard determinism cannot describe the perspective of the agent, of what is it like to make choices. They want to suggest instead that that perspective of the agent is an illusion. Remember Baron de Holbach, who suggested that when we are deliberating between one course of action and another, I'm thinking about going out even though I've been told by the CDC that's not a good thing. When I'm deliberating about those kinds of things, Baron de Holbach says that's simply the pinball bouncing around through the various objects until it falls where it's going to and determined to fall anyway. Remember, he's a determinist. But the problem with that is it seems as if I'm making choices. It seems as if I'm deliberated. It's not deliberating. It's not as if I'm just being smacked about from various kinds of causes. And instead of I'm assessing the desires and reasons that are coming upon me. If I go out, the CDC tells me not to do that. I may contract the coronavirus myself. I may give it to other people. I need to limit my exposure. But then again, I need to go out to the store. We all, of course, need more toilet paper for some reason. I need to go out and do this or that. I need to go get food for my dogs or get some more coffee, and I have to weigh the risks of going out over against my desire for these products. And so it appears to me as if I'm deliberating. The Holbach, the hard determinist, says, oh, that's not really what's going on. You're simply being smacked about by various kinds of causes. And that seems to not quite resonate with our experience of choice. Conditioning and freedom is another issue that we need to bring up with regard to the history or the determinism and freedom issue. Conditioning and freedom, we all recognize that we can be conditioned. Our histories, our conditioning may incline us towards certain kinds of choices. The fact that I am deliberating going out and getting some coffee because I'm out of it comes from my conditioning. I'm conditioned to want coffee in the morning. To me, it's what makes the start of a good day. And so but that's a matter of conditioning. I can say no to that. It's not a compulsion. But I do realize that I am inclined towards certain kinds of choices because of my conditioning, because of the way I was raised. And you could find some parallels as well. Nevertheless, choices have to be made. No matter the conditioning, the choice is not determined. I can't think of a choice that is determined by me. It seems as if I'm free. Conditioning only determines the degree of the difficulty of the choice. That is, if I'm conditioned a particular kind of way, like coffee for me is pretty important. I need coffee in the morning, but I can go without breakfast. I do that all the time. I'm not conditioned to have that. For some of you, it may be you're conditioned to go out and exercise regularly. I wish I had that conditioning. I do exercise, but it's not a strong desire and compulsion for me. So we do recognize when we think about freedom and determinism that we are determined sometimes to do things and conditioned to do some things, but it sure seems like we're free quite a lot. The problem for libertarian notions of freedom is explaining how it rises above the seeming lockstep of cause and effect. And that still remains to be explained at any level with regard to human beings. Is freedom genuine, or is it just an illusion? So why don't we stop there, and we will continue on next. We'll get into the next unit, and that has to do with ethics next time. I hope you enjoyed that listening to this was helpful for your study. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me, contact me. I want to make sure you succeed this semester and you understand this material really well. I'll talk with you soon. Goodbye.